Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about the Western animation industry and the collapse of the Western animation industry, especially in LA. And it's interesting, I just did a podcast episode last week with Fresher Luke talking about this very same thing. Now, I'm sure his perspective is going to be different than this other guy's, but Cartoon Brew put up an article today or yesterday talking about somebody who's currently working in the industry, and there are a lot of the same points that we talked about.
Yep.
A lot of the same points that we've talked about in other videos, that basically the LA animation scene is imploding, and there are a variety of reasons for that, but we have noticed more and more people that were, showrunners for years now are not running anything. They're not working on anything, apparently. Some of them are out there with GoFundMes. They're looking for work. It's a very different climate than it was 4 or 5 years ago. So we're going to talk about this. Yep. We're going to talk about it. Hashtag Clownfish was right. Can I say that? Am I allowed to say that?
I don't know. We're not always right, but we're right a lot.
We're not always right. But
I'm not going to say we are, because we're not always right.
But it feels like things have definitely done a 180 from where they were at the beginning of the pandemic, when, remember, everybody was like, oh, we're going to go all in on animation because you can work from home on that.
Yeah, and it wasn't even the beginning of the pandemic. It was like later on the pandemic, and I was like, wait a minute. By the time they get this stuff going, everybody's getting back to work. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and what's weird about that is, animation takes a long time.
It does.
And it's also very expensive.
It is.
Well, unless you outsource it to North Korea, which more and more companies are doing, apparently. But we'll talk about this. Before you get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. You get a woohoo if you do.
Woohoo!
This is coming from Cartoon Brew, which I do think is probably the best blog out there for legit information on the animation industry. And they actually tell people what they don't want to hear, and they get attacked on Twitter all the time by these animation stands that think they know what the industry is actually like.
Well, that kind of sounds like us. As long as we tell people what they want to hear, they're happy. But as soon as we tell them that what we think is the truth and it's not what they want to hear, then they start coming at us.
Yep. So this is, they've been around for like 20 years now. Cartoon Brew. An industry worker explains why the U.S. animation industry has collapsed. Now, he has a video out on YouTube, which you will have to go watch yourself. I don't want to get demonetized or whatever. But he said that the industry is indeed experiencing some turmoil and uncertainty about its future. This is Zach Mulligan, the person who put together the video. He's an industry worker with experience at DreamWorks, Scanline VFX, and the Jim Henson Company, and now started his own company. In the video, he offers a concise argument for why the animation industry, and more specifically, the LA animation industry.
See, when you said the LA industry specifically, is in trouble.
Because, there's stuff getting greenlit, but even look at Netflix. Look at what they're taking. They're taking stuff from overseas. They're bringing anime over. Even
the companies here that are doing stuff are sending it to other countries or Canada.
Yes. Even Disney outsourced, they built a whole nother studio in Canada.
Right.
That they did Moana 2 up there, and they didn't really tell anybody they were doing it.
So, and a big part of the problem is I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the animators in LA want a lot of things. And I'm not saying they're wrong to want, some of these things. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, these companies aren't your friend. They're a business.
Right.
And they're going to go where they can get people and costs down.
See, this is what gets me about this. We talk about kind of the causation effect and why things are the way they are and how companies are going to perceive them. And people immediately assume that we're taking the side of the companies, and it's like we're not. It's just we've been around and worked around these companies for a while, and I myself come from a corporate background, and it's like I'm going to tell you they're going to look at the situation and they're going to do XYZ thing. That doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it.
However,
it just means
sometimes we do, because if there's people wanting unionization just so they can tell the company what they can and can't pick for projects, I'm going to side with the company and tell you to fuck off. But anyway, continue.
In that case, I do believe if your working conditions are piss poor.
Oh yeah, 100%. You have a right to say something.
You have a right to unionize.
I
but
agree.
if it's about editorial control, which more and more people are doing it, For editorial control, it's a different thing.
For example, VFX workers wanting to unionize, completely agree with, because their situation has not been very fair. I completely think that you should unionize, and they are. The people over at Image wanting to unionize so they can demand what projects get done. No, quite frankly, you should kindly fuck off. There's a difference. Continue.
Okay, so just to go back to this, and you should listen to this. I talked to Fresher Luke we talked for about an hour and a half. We wound up talking for like an hour and a half. It was a pretty good conversation. He has his opinions about the way, the reason that things are the way they are right now. And he does get into some inside baseball, but a lot of the same talking points, came up in that conversation that this guy has. And we talked about how it seemed like, Cartoon Network was imploding. Mm-hmm. Streaming services were not greenlighting shows like they were.
No.
And that this guy brings the same thing up. So if you don't like me, or you don't like Fresher Luke, it doesn't matter. Here's another guy who doesn't even have a dog in it telling you the same things.
Well, that's just it. Just because you don't like someone doesn't mean that they're wrong.
Right.
There's a difference between you disagree because they're wrong and you disagree because you don't like them. That's not the same thing.
All right, so Mulligan says the streaming bubble has burst. Who would have thunk that people wouldn't like subscribing to a half a dozen different streaming services? He points out that streaming isn't even particularly profitable for the companies, with the possible exception of Netflix. The economics of streaming are simply not as lucrative as theatrical releases.
That's not being much more lucrative anymore.
Not with a lot of animation, not unless it's a big tentpole.
Not Disney anyway. How much money did they keep losing? I lost track.
$130 million on Wish, and then DreamWorks put Ruby Gillman out there.
Oh, Ruby Gillman, yeah.
It made like $8 million opening weekend. And they're getting rid of physical media, because back in the day, it used to be that you could justify movies because you knew parents were going to buy it on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever, and the kids are going to watch it over and over again. They're getting rid of that now. So, it's like, how do you monetize these very expensive movies? He said, so the increase in spending during the pandemic became a bubble, and now the workers that were staffed up with false promises are feeling the repercussions. Mm-hmm. This includes showrunners. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not attacking anyone in particular, but there were some people that were associated with Crunchyroll originals that were well promoted that are out there now looking for work because all that's dried up. Layoffs. The industry is downsizing as part of a deliberate strategy to rein in costs.
Yes.
Sorry, it's at the end of the day, it's about money. Layoffs have become such a regular occurrence over the past couple of years that we had to launch a layoff tracker just to make sense of what's happening industry-wide. This is Cartoon Brew saying it. As Mulligan points out, studio execs at the top are often receiving bonuses for the cost savings. Yes.
Truth. This is true.
This is true. You save us $300 million, we'll kick an extra $1 million over to you.
Oh, it's more than $1 million.
Well,
I'm trying to simplify it. And we'll give you several million,
yes. Outsourcing. This is the big one. Don't agree with it, but you got to make things as cheaply as possible, right? This is nothing new, but there has been a paradigm shift in recent years. Until recently, numerous studios produced all of their animated features in-house. Last year, we talked about this. Last year, DreamWorks announced it would be increasing its use of outsourcing, while Disney shifted some of the production of Moana 2 to Canada. This leaves Pixar as the only American studio that produces all of its animated features in the U.S. For now. A scenario that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Yeah, look how much it's changed just in 5 years. It went from like everybody who had any kind of a following on Tumblr was getting plucked off of Tumblr and given millions of dollars to play with, and they could do whatever the hell they wanted to do. And, they were given carte blanche to destroy franchises or whatever and talk about certain series. And now it's like, they can't even find work.
You're going to notice throughout this article, Disney keeps being brought up an awful lot. Anyway, continue.
Mergers and acquisitions. The most obvious example is Disney's acquisition of Fox, which resulted in the shuttering of Blue Sky Studios. But as Mulligan warns, the era of M&A is likely not over yet.
Oh, no. This is going to go on for a while.
Paramount is probably the next one, and Paramount was doing Paramount's got all the Nickelodeon stuff.
Well, I'm not completely convinced that Disney Animation and Pixar aren't gonna.
I think Disney, it doesn't look I'm not saying I agree with it, but from a purely bean counters point of view, if Pixar is not bringing it, I think a lot rides on Inside Out too, because Lightyear was a massive failure for them. From a bean counters point of view, we have two studios doing pretty much the exact same thing.
Well, not just that. Every time Walt Disney Animation puts out a film, it's Walt Disney Animation. When Pixar puts out a film, it's Disney Pixar.
So you just cut out the.
You just call it Disney Pixar.
Just call it Disney Pixar, or just get rid of the Pixar. And you've got Pixar legacy characters.
I don't think they will because the name's too valuable, but I think I could see them going Disney, just going Disney Pixar.
They shut down Disney Toon Studios. Look, they shut down Blue Sky. Blue Sky was making profitable movies, right? And they shut them down. Just boom, you're gone. So I could totally see it because you've got two campuses. Like people said the Pixar campus in San Francisco is ridiculously expensive, and all these workers are expensive. So you just you merge them together. Generative AI. We already know that thanks to this recent study co-commissioned by the Animation Guild that tens of thousands of U.S. animation jobs are at risk of disruption with the wave of AI-assisted production. Yes, and the AI doesn't talk back.
Yeah. Again, it's something else that we don't agree with personally.
No,
but we're just saying it's the reality. Not agreeing with it does. And it's you can not agree with it, but still recognize the reality of something.
And this is exactly what we said. Top level creative work won't be affected anytime soon, but rank and file production workers are at a significant risk. Again, I'm thinking with 2D animation in betweeners. I'm thinking with 3D animation, you let the AI pick up some of the grunt work.
That's just it.
Yeah, I've seen demos of text to animation they're already working on where basically, and I forget the name of the application, but I was looking into it like a month ago, and it was like, wow, things are moving really, really quick.
Well, they're saying it'd be a significant risk in coming decades. Oh no, I don't think it's going to be coming decades. I think it's going to be a significant risk within the decade. I don't even give it 10 years.
I think what will happen now, the good thing for independent animators is I think that the playing field will be leveled, and I think that you can put out amazing animation with a skeleton crew. I think you could maybe have a half a dozen people put out something pretty amazing, whereas it would have taken 60 people or 600 people before. But that means that there's 500 plus people out of work because you don't need them anymore. He said the two silver linings that give hope for the future. He identifies the rise. Yeah, there we go. Indie animation studios and their ability to create content that connects with fans in ways that polished, committee-driven studios can't. And what of artists who work in the industry, he explains the best weapon industry workers have at the moment is contract negotiations. People are going to accuse us of being anti-union. I think that can backfire at this point because I think when you ask for the moon and they're like, hey, we're cutting back on spending. Oh, you want twice as much money?
This is hence the reason that LA is getting hit particularly hard.
Right. So, it's kind of and again, not that I agree with it, but it is a cautionary tale. Just be prepared to walk away from the industry entirely if things do not go your way. Because this is what happened. The Writers Guild and the Actors Guild, they got what they wanted. They got their raise, right? But then what happened? The studios decided they were going to cut back on the number of productions. So they're still probably spending less money than they would before. They're spending less money overall on fewer productions that they think are going to make them more money, which means there are a whole bunch of people unemployed in LA now.
Well, that goes to this next part. It said the third reason to be hopeful is animation is at this moment experiencing unprecedented global growth.
Yes.
It's booming on a global level with hundreds of thousands of new people joining the community. However, they're in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And some of those places are a hell of a lot cheaper to animate in. Than North America. Yeah,
so again, that's going to be hard because and this is kind of what started to chip away at every other creative industry is you're competing with people that work cheaper. Their cost of living is not as expensive in other countries. And, Netflix especially, they're like, yeah, we'll take global content. We'll take it. We'll outsource it. Disney's already was that one movie they had the kind of like... the
Waju?
Yeah. Was that the one where it was like it was the African produced?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where they produced that at. I don't know if it was produced.
I think it was Africa.
I know it was another company they worked with, but I'm not sure out of where.
Right, but I could see them doing more of that. Being like, you know what, let's have this animated in another country, and then we get all kinds of points for diversity. But we're also doing it cheaper because it's cheaper to work with people overseas.
Well, that's what they're going to do the whole way around. Yeah. They can go to other countries and like, oh, look, we're diverse.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen.
But they're like, oh, there's going to be struggling and it's growing pains, but animation isn't going anywhere. I agree. Animation isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. Do I think that a lot of people are going to still be employed? No.
No.
At least not in LA.
Not in LA. But again, if you're living in like Wisconsin or something, in a few years, you'll probably be able to produce something that's as good as they would have produced in Burbank with fewer people. So there's that silver lining too, right?
Yep.
Are we going to wrap this up?
Yes.
Okay. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We'll talk later.
Bye.